Most people do not come looking for ideas like this because they are curious. They come because something in life feels tight, urgent, unfinished. They want relief. They want movement. And that is exactly where this begins. Not as a philosophy lesson, and not as a debate, but as a practical guide for anyone who wants real financial change. Beneath all the noise, there is a pattern here, surprisingly simple once you see it. So let's step into it carefully and see what it asks of you. There is a quiet belief many people carry around often without even realizing it. A belief that wanting money is somehow shallow, that the desire to become rich is a sign of greed or selfishness or moral weakness. You see it in conversations. You hear it in passing remarks. Someone says they want to be wealthy, and immediately there is this subtle pressure to soften it, to apologize for it, to pretend they don't really mean it. But step back for a moment and look at life honestly. Not through slogans, not through social expectations, but through the simple reality of how human life actually works. A person cannot live a full life without resources. It's that simple. To live completely, to grow, to experience, to develop everything that exists inside you, you need access to things. And in the world we live in, those things almost always require money. Think about the body first. Even the most basic physical life requires certain conditions. Food that nourishes you, clothes that protect you, a safe and comfortable place to live, time to rest, space to move, opportunities for recreation. None of these things appear out of thin air. They all require resources. They all require access to material things. And material things in the society we live in are obtained through money. Without money, a person spends most of their energy simply trying to survive. They worry about rent. They worry about food. They worry about the next bill that is coming. Their attention becomes trapped in the narrow circle of immediate needs. There is no room to breathe, no room to explore, no room to grow. So the desire for wealth at its most basic level is simply the desire for freedom from that constant pressure. It is the desire for a life where the body can exist in comfort and strength instead of stress and scarcity. But the body is only one part of who you are. There is also the mind. And the mind, just like the body, develops through use. To grow mentally, a person needs access to ideas, experiences, knowledge, and stimulation. Books, education, travel, conversation, exposure to art, exposure to new environments. All of these things feed the mind and help it expand. But again, look honestly at how the world works. Most of these opportunities require money. Books must be purchased. Education must be paid for. Travel requires transportation time and resources. Even something as simple as having time to sit and think deeply about ideas often depends on having the financial stability that frees you from constant labor. Without that stability, a person's mental life becomes limited. They may have intelligence, curiosity, and potential, but the opportunities to develop those qualities remain out of reach. And then there is the soul. Now, when people hear that word, they sometimes imagine something distant from everyday life, something mystical or abstract. But in simple terms, the soul is the part of you that longs for connection, meaning love, beauty, and expression. The soul wants to give. It wants to care for others. It wants to create. It wants to share joy. It wants to participate in something larger than survival. And strangely enough, money plays a role here too. Think about the simple act of giving. A parent wants to support their children. A partner wants to care for their family. A friend wants to help someone in need. A person wants to contribute to their community support, causes they believe in, or bring comfort to people they love. But if a person has nothing to give, if they are struggling just to keep their own life afloat, then even their deepest desire to help others becomes limited. Love wants expression. Generosity wants expression. But poverty restricts those expressions in ways that many people never talk about openly. A person with resources can give freely. They can share opportunities. They can lift others. They can support ideas, projects, and people that matter to them. So when you really look at it carefully, wanting to become rich is not about hoarding wealth. It is about expanding the range of what you can do with your life. It is about having the ability to develop your body, your mind, and your soul fully. And that desire to become everything you are capable of becoming is one of the most natural impulses in human nature. In fact, it is almost impossible to suppress it. Every person at some level wants to grow. They want to improve. They want to expand their abilities and their experiences. They want to become more than they are today. That impulse shows up everywhere. You see it in a child who wants to learn something new. You see it in someone who dreams about building something meaningful. You see it in people who long to travel, create, explore, teach, lead, help, or invent. These desires are not accidents. They come from a deeper force within life itself, the constant movement toward growth and expansion. Life wants to become more life. Every living thing follows that impulse. A seed does not remain a seed forever. It grows into a plant. The plant spreads. It produces more seeds. Life expands. Human beings are no different. The desire to grow, to become stronger, wiser, more capable, more influential, is simply the human expression of that same universal impulse. And because growth requires tools, opportunities, and resources, the desire for wealth becomes part of that larger movement. Wealth is not the goal by itself. Wealth is the means that allows life to expand. But here is where many people get confused. They assume that wanting wealth means wanting excess or luxury for its own sake. They imagine wealth as something separate from meaningful living. But the deeper argument is different. True wealth simply means having enough resources to live fully, to experience everything life has to offer, to develop your abilities, and to contribute to the world around you. Someone who has everything they need to live the fullest life they are capable of living is in a real sense rich. And in the complex society we live in today, that usually requires a significant amount of money, not because money itself is magical, but because money functions as the key that unlocks access to the world. It opens doors. It allows you to choose your environment instead of being trapped in it. It allows you to invest in your education, your health, your projects, and your relationships. It allows you to explore ideas, build things, help people, and experience the beauty and complexity of life. Without it, even the most ambitious dreams often remain dreams. That is why understanding how wealth is created becomes such an important form of knowledge. If money plays such a central role in unlocking the possibilities of life, then learning how to obtain it honestly, intelligently, and effectively becomes one of the most practical studies a person can pursue. And yet, strangely, many people spend years learning subjects that have very little direct impact on their ability to live fully, while never seriously studying how wealth is actually created. They work hard. They follow instructions. They do what society tells them to do. But they never stop to ask a deeper question. What actually causes one person to become wealthy, while another person remains stuck struggling year after year? Because if you look around carefully, something very interesting appears. In the same city, in the same industry, sometimes even in the same building, two people can work equally hard and live completely different financial lives. One accumulates wealth, the other barely gets by. And the difference is not always intelligence. It is not always education. It is not always talent. Something else is at work, which leads to a simple but powerful conclusion. If wealth plays such a central role in allowing a person to live fully, and if the outcomes people experience are not random, then there must be principles behind the process. There must be patterns that explain why wealth flows toward some people and not toward others. And if those patterns exist, then they can be understood. If they can be understood, they can be practiced. And if they can be practiced, then wealth stops being something mysterious or accidental. It becomes something learnable, something practical, something within reach. Which brings us back to the beginning. The desire to become rich is not something to feel ashamed of. It is simply the desire to live fully, to grow fully, to experience everything your abilities and potential make possible. And the moment you accept that idea without guilt or hesitation, something interesting happens. You stop apologizing for wanting more out of life, and you begin to ask a far more useful question. If wealth truly allows a person to develop their body, mind, and soul, and if wealth follows certain patterns, then what exactly are those patterns? Let's pause for a moment and look at one of the boldest claims in this entire idea. It's a claim that sounds almost too simple at first, and maybe even a little unbelievable. The claim is this: getting rich is not random. It is not a matter of luck, chance, or mysterious destiny. Instead, it follows exact laws just as reliable as those in mathematics or physics. Think about that for a second. When you add 2 and 2 together, you always get 4. It doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter where you live. The rule works the same way every single time because the law behind it is exact. The argument here is that wealth works in a similar way. Not in the sense that money magically appears, of course, but in the sense that certain actions consistently produce certain results. When those actions are repeated in the right way, the outcome becomes predictable. That idea alone changes how you look at success, because most people grow up believing the opposite. They assume wealth belongs only to the lucky few. They think it depends on being born into the right family, living in the right city, knowing the right people, or stumbling onto the right opportunity at the perfect moment. And yes, those things can help. No one is pretending they don't exist. But if they were the real cause of wealth, something very strange would happen. Everyone in the same environment would become rich. If location were the deciding factor, then everyone living in a prosperous city would be wealthy. Every person working in a thriving industry would be financially successful. Every neighbor on the same street would experience the same level of prosperity. But that's not what we see. Instead, we see something very different. 2 people can work in the same company doing similar jobs under the same conditions. One slowly builds wealth and opportunity. The other remains stuck in the same financial position year after year. 2 small businesses can open on the same street. One grows, expands, and flourishes. The other struggles to survive. 2 individuals can start life with nearly identical circumstances, similar education, similar resources, similar opportunities, and yet their financial lives drift in completely different directions. If environment were the main cause, those differences wouldn't exist. But they do, which means environment cannot be the real explanation. And when you start examining the other common explanations, the same pattern appears. Take intelligence, for example. We often assume that the smartest people naturally become the richest. It sounds logical. Intelligence leads to good decisions. Good decisions lead to success. And success leads to wealth. But again, reality tells a different story. You've probably met incredibly intelligent people who struggle financially, people who understand complex ideas, people who excel in school, people who can analyze problems in brilliant ways, and yet somehow money never seems to stick around them. At the same time, there are people with very ordinary levels of intelligence who build enormous financial success. They are not necessarily the smartest in the room. They are not academic geniuses. Yet they manage to create opportunities, grow businesses, and accumulate wealth. So intelligence alone cannot explain the difference. What about talent? Surely talent must play a role. The more talented you are, the more success you create, right? But again, the evidence doesn't fully support that idea. The world is full of talented people who never become financially secure, brilliant artists who struggle to pay rent, skilled craftsmen who never build wealth, exceptional athletes who never convert their abilities into lasting prosperity. Meanwhile, there are people with fairly average talents who become extremely wealthy. So talent alone cannot explain it either. Then people often turn to another explanation: hard work. Work harder, they say. Put in more hours. Push yourself further than everyone else. But if hard work were the deciding factor, the hardest working people in society would always be the richest. And we know that's not true. In fact, some of the hardest working people in the world struggle the most financially. People who labor long hours every day, who push themselves physically and mentally, yet never seem to move beyond survival. Hard work is important, of course, but by itself it does not guarantee wealth. And then there's the idea of saving and thrift. Many people believe wealth is simply the result of careful saving. Spend less than you earn, put money aside, and eventually it accumulates. But even this explanation doesn't hold up completely. You can find people who are extremely careful with money, people who avoid unnecessary expenses and live modestly, and yet they remain financially limited for decades. At the same time, you can find individuals who spend freely and still manage to build enormous fortunes. So thrift alone cannot explain wealth either. When you step back and look at all these examples together, a pattern begins to emerge. The usual explanations: luck, environment, intelligence, talent, hard work, saving none of them. Consistently explain why some people become wealthy and others do not. Which leaves us with a much more interesting possibility. What if the real difference lies in something deeper, not in circumstances, not in raw ability, but in the way people think and act, more specifically in a certain pattern of action? Imagine for a moment that wealth is the natural result of doing things in a particular way. Not occasionally, not accidentally, but consistently. Just like in science. In science, when the same conditions are repeated, the same results appear. If you apply the same formula in mathematics, you always get the same answer. The claim here is that wealth follows a similar principle. When people act in a certain way, wealth follows. And when they act in a different way, even if they work hard and possess talent, wealth does not accumulate. This is why two people can stand side by side in the same industry and experience completely different outcomes. It isn't because one of them was lucky and the other wasn't. It isn't because one of them lived in a better city. It's because one of them consciously or unconsciously followed a pattern of action that leads to wealth, and the other did not. Sometimes this happens by accident. A person might stumble into the right way of acting without fully understanding why it works. They make certain decisions, approach opportunities in certain ways, handle relationships and work in certain patterns, and wealth gradually flows toward them. From the outside, it looks like luck. But if you examine their actions carefully, you often discover consistent behaviors behind the success. On the other hand, someone else might work just as hard but follow a completely different pattern of action. They make decisions based on fear. They react to circumstances instead of shaping them. They move without a clear direction. They focus on survival instead of growth. And over time, the financial results reflect those patterns. This is where the idea becomes powerful. Because if wealth truly comes from acting in a certain way, then the path to wealth becomes something that can be studied, something that can be understood, something that can be practiced. It stops being mysterious. It stops being reserved for a special class of people. Instead, it becomes a process that anyone can learn. And this idea carries an incredibly hopeful implication. It means that your starting point does not permanently determine your outcome. You might begin with very little capital. You might live in an ordinary town. You might work in a job that feels small or limiting. But none of those conditions automatically prevent wealth from developing. Because if the real cause of wealth lies in a specific pattern of thought and action, then the moment you begin practicing that pattern, your circumstances begin to change. Not instantly, of course. Just like in any science, results unfold through a process. But the direction becomes clear. Think of it like planting seeds. If you plant the right seeds and care for them properly, growth follows. It may take time, it may require patience, but the outcome is built into the process itself. The same principle applies here. The key question is not whether wealth exists. We know it does. The key question is not whether some people are capable of creating it. We know they are. The real question is this: what exactly are they doing differently? What pattern of thinking and acting consistently produces wealth? Because once that pattern is understood, it stops being a mystery. And once it stops being a mystery, it becomes something that can be deliberately practiced. Anyone who learns the pattern and follows it faithfully can begin moving toward the same outcome. That is the core claim. Wealth is not a lottery. It is the result of certain actions performed in a certain way. And when those actions are repeated consistently, the results appear with the same reliability you would expect from any other scientific principle. Which raises an even more interesting question. If wealth really follows a pattern like this, what exactly is that pattern? What does this certain way of acting actually look like in real life? Because once that becomes clear, everything begins to change. Now, once you begin to consider the idea that wealth follows certain laws, another question naturally appears. It's a question many people carry quietly in the back of their minds sometimes, without even putting it into words. Even if wealth follows a pattern, even if there really is a certain way of acting that leads to prosperity, what if the opportunity is already gone? What if everything valuable has already been claimed by someone else? It's an understandable fear. You look around the world and see massive corporations, powerful industries, enormous fortunes already accumulated. Entire markets seem dominated by people who arrived long before you. It's easy to feel as if all the doors are already closed, as if every path to wealth has been fenced off. But if you pause and examine the situation carefully, that belief begins to fall apart. The first thing to understand is that wealth itself is not a fixed pile of goods waiting to be divided. It is not like a single pie sitting on a table where every slice taken by one person leaves less for everyone else. Wealth is constantly being created. It expands. It evolves. It grows as human imagination and effort transform raw materials into new forms of value. Think about how much the world has changed even within the last 100 years. Entire industries have appeared that no one could have imagined before. Fields like aviation, digital technology, renewable energy, biotechnology, space, exploration. These did not exist in the same form just a short time ago. They were not taken away from someone else. They were created. That alone should make you question the idea that opportunity is limited. If wealth were truly monopolized, if every possible path to prosperity were already sealed, then no new industries would ever emerge. No new companies would rise. No new fortunes would be built. But history shows the opposite happening again and again. Opportunity constantly shifts. Sometimes it moves slowly, sometimes it moves suddenly, but it never stops moving. This movement happens because society itself is always evolving. Needs change, technologies develop, new ideas appear. As each change occurs, fresh opportunities open up, often in places that were invisible only a few years earlier. The difficulty is that many people keep looking in the wrong direction. Instead of watching where opportunity is forming, they focus on areas that are already crowded. They see others succeeding in a particular field and rush toward it, hoping to compete for the same space. But when thousands of people try to squeeze through the same narrow doorway, competition becomes fierce and the sense of scarcity grows stronger. Yet the doorway was never the real opportunity in the first place. The real opportunity is usually somewhere else, often in a place where needs are emerging, but few people have noticed yet. History provides countless examples of this pattern. At one time, railroads seemed like the ultimate industry. Entire fortunes were built around controlling railway systems. From the outside, it looked as if transportation was already dominated and that no new entrant could possibly compete. And yet new forms of transportation emerged. Electric railways, automobiles, air travel. Each development opened entirely new avenues for wealth creation. Not because someone stole opportunity from the railroad industry, but because human creativity discovered new ways to move people and goods. The same pattern repeats everywhere. Whenever society grows and changes, new needs appear. Those needs become the seeds of new industries, new services, new products, and new careers. And where there is a need, there is opportunity. But the deeper point here goes even further. The idea being presented is not simply that new industries will appear from time to time. It's that the underlying supply of wealth, the raw potential from which all material things are created, is essentially unlimited. Everything you see in the physical world comes from raw materials. Buildings, machines, clothing vehicles, technology infrastructure, all of it begins as natural resources drawn from the earth and shaped through human effort. And when you consider the scale of the planet itself, the idea of scarcity becomes much less convincing. The amount of material available for human use is enormous. The land, the minerals, the energy sources, the oceans, the forests, the atmosphere itself, all of these contain immense reserves of potential value. Even the resources we have already used represent only a tiny fraction of what exists. And beyond that, new methods of extracting and transforming resources appear constantly. Materials that were once useless suddenly become valuable when technology discovers a new application for them. Think about how oil was once considered little more than a nuisance leaking out of the ground, or how silicon, an ordinary element found in sand, became the foundation of the entire digital revolution. The raw materials of wealth are not disappearing. They are waiting for new ideas, waiting for new forms of organization, waiting for people who understand how to transform them into something useful. Which brings us back to the earlier point. Poverty is not primarily caused by a shortage of resources. The world contains more than enough material to provide comfortable lives for everyone. The real cause of poverty lies elsewhere. It lies in the failure to act in the certain way that leads to wealth. Many people work hard all their lives without understanding the principles that allow effort to multiply into prosperity. They remain trapped in patterns of action that produce only small returns, while others who follow different patterns gradually accumulate greater and greater opportunity. This is not because the wealthy have seized all the available resources. It is because they have learned, sometimes consciously, sometimes instinctively, how to align their actions with the forces that create growth. When someone learns to do this, they stop trying to take a slice from someone else's pie. Instead, they begin helping create entirely new pies. This shift in thinking is crucial. When people believe wealth is limited, they fall into a competitive mindset. They begin to see every successful person as someone who has taken something away from them. They view the economy as a battlefield where everyone is fighting over a shrinking supply. But when you understand that wealth is constantly being created, competition becomes less important than creativity. The question stops being, how do I beat everyone else? And becomes, what new value can I help bring into existence? That question opens far more possibilities. Because human needs are endless. People will always want better ways to communicate, better ways to travel, better ways to learn, better ways to stay healthy, better ways to entertain themselves, better ways to connect with others. Every improvement in any of those areas creates new wealth. And that wealth does not require someone else to become poorer. It expands the total amount of value available to everyone. This is why opportunity cannot truly be monopolized. Even if one industry becomes dominated by a few powerful players, new industries continue to appear. Even if one path to success becomes crowded, another path begins forming somewhere else. But to see these opportunities, a person must shift their attention away from competition and toward creation. Instead of asking, where can I compete with everyone else? The question becomes, where can I add something new? Often the answer lies in areas where change is already underway. When technology evolves, entire systems must adapt. Businesses must reorganize. New skills become valuable. Old methods fade away. Each transition opens a window for those who are ready to move with the tide instead of resisting it. People who align themselves with these emerging directions often find opportunity waiting where others see uncertainty. And that is why understanding the certain way of acting matters so much. It trains you to watch the movement of growth instead of clinging to the past. It teaches you to recognize the signs of expanding opportunity, rather than fearing that everything has already been taken. Because the truth is, wealth is still being created every single day. New companies start. New technologies emerge. New problems demand new solutions. New markets appear where none existed before. The supply of possibility remains vast. But accessing that possibility requires a different mindset. A mindset that sees abundance instead of scarcity. A mindset that looks forward instead of backward. A mindset that understands wealth is not locked away behind guarded gates, but constantly forming wherever human creativity meets human need. Once you see the world through that lens, something shifts. The feeling that everything is already taken begins to fade, and in its place, a different realization slowly takes hold. Opportunity is not disappearing. It is simply waiting for the people who know how to recognize it and how to act when it appears. Up to this point, we've been talking about patterns, about the idea that wealth follows certain laws, that opportunity is not limited, and that the outcomes people experience often come from the way they act rather than from their circumstances. But beneath all of those ideas lies an even deeper claim. In fact, it may be the most unusual idea in the entire framework. The claim is that thought itself plays a direct role in shaping reality. Now, at first, that might sound abstract, almost philosophical. But the argument being presented is actually meant to be very practical. It begins with a simple question: where do things come from? Take any object around you, a house, a chair, a road, a phone in your hand. None of these things simply appeared by accident. Before they existed in the physical world, they existed somewhere else first. They existed in someone's mind. Someone imagined them. Someone pictured their form, their structure, their use. That mental image existed before the object itself was built. Only after the idea appeared in thought did people begin to gather materials, organize labor, and bring the object into the world. In other words, thought preceded form. And once you begin noticing this pattern, you see it everywhere. Every building began as an idea in an architect's mind. Every invention began as a vision inside the imagination of the person who created it. Every piece of art, every technological breakthrough, every new system of organization, before any of these things appeared physically, they existed as thought. Human beings constantly reshape the world through this process. First, the idea appears. Then the physical form follows. But the philosophy behind this idea goes even deeper. It suggests that the relationship between thought and form does not exist only inside the human mind. Instead, it proposes that the entire universe operates according to a similar principle. According to this view, everything that exists emerges from a single underlying substance. Not separate materials competing with each other, but one original substance from which all forms are created. This substance is described as formless in its original state. It does not appear as mountains, trees, oceans, or buildings. Instead, it exists as the raw material out of which all those forms eventually arise. And here is the striking part. This original substance is said to be alive with intelligence. Not in the sense of human personality, but in the sense that it responds to thought. It is described as a thinking substance. That idea may sound strange at first, but the argument unfolds in a surprisingly logical way. Look again at nature. Everything you see around you appears to follow patterns of growth and development. Seeds become plants. Cells divide and form complex organisms. Entire ecosystems organize themselves into balanced systems where countless processes operate together. From the smallest living cell to the largest galaxies, the universe seems to operate according to structured patterns rather than chaos. The idea presented here is that these patterns arise because the underlying substance of the universe contains the ability to think, to organize itself according to certain forms. In other words, form emerges from thought. And that brings us to the first key principle. There is one original substance from which all things are made. Every object, every structure, every living being, no matter how complex, ultimately arises from this same foundational material. At first, this idea may sound mystical, but when you consider modern science, it becomes less unusual. Physics has shown that matter itself is not made from separate isolated substances, but from different configurations of the same fundamental energy. Different forms appear because the underlying substance organizes itself in different ways. The philosophy we're exploring simply extends that idea into the realm of thought. It suggests that the forms we see in the world are the result of thought acting within this universal substance. That brings us to the second key principle. Thought held within this thinking substance produces form. Think again about how ideas move through human society. When a powerful idea appears, it begins influencing behavior. People organize themselves around it. They build structures to support it. They develop tools and systems that bring the idea into physical reality. In that sense, ideas already shape the world. But the argument here is that this process works at an even deeper level. The thinking substance that fills the universe responds to thought itself. When a definite idea is held within it, the creative energy of the universe begins moving toward giving that idea form. This does not mean that objects instantly appear from thin air. Creation still unfolds through processes. Materials must be gathered. People must act. Time must pass. But the direction of creation begins with thought. A thought becomes a pattern. That pattern influences actions. Those actions organize materials and energy into the physical form that matches the original idea. Seen from this perspective, thought is not merely a private experience inside the mind. It is the starting point of every creation that eventually appears in the physical world. And now we arrive at the third principle. Human beings are thinking centers capable of originating thought. This is where the entire idea becomes practical. Humans are not passive observers inside the universe. They possess the ability to generate ideas, hold them in mind, and act upon them. Every invention that exists today began with a person who imagined something that did not yet exist. The same process applies to wealth. Before a person builds a successful enterprise, they imagine it. Before they develop a product, they picture it. Before they organize a system that produces value, the idea forms inside their mind. What this philosophy suggests is that when a person holds a clear and definite thought with conviction and purpose, that thought interacts with the creative forces of the universe. It becomes impressed upon the thinking substance from which all forms emerge. From that moment, the process of creation begins moving toward bringing that idea into reality. Again, this does not mean the universe magically delivers finished objects overnight. Creation still happens through natural channels. Opportunities appear, ideas evolve, other people become involved, resources move into position. Events unfold that gradually transform the original idea into tangible results. But the key point is that thought sets the direction. Without the original thought, the process never begins. That is why learning to think in a certain way becomes so important. If the creative substance of the universe responds to thought, then the quality and clarity of a person's thinking directly influences what eventually appears in their life. Vague thoughts produce vague results. Confused thinking produces scattered outcomes. But clear, focused, persistent thought, combined with action, creates the conditions for definite results to appear. This is why the philosophy emphasizes mental clarity. Before a person can create anything in the world, they must first form a clear image of what they want. Just as an architect cannot build a house without first designing it, a person cannot create wealth without first forming a definite concept of what that wealth looks like in their life. The mental image comes first. Then the creative process begins organizing events around that image. This idea leads to an interesting shift in how you look at your own mind. Instead of seeing thoughts as random reactions to the world, you begin to see them as creative tools. Your thoughts become the blueprints for the experiences you eventually build. That does not mean every passing thought instantly shapes reality, but persistent thoughts, ideas held with intention and belief, tend to influence the direction of your actions, your decisions, and the opportunities you recognize. Over time, those influences accumulate. They shape the course of your life. And that is why the philosophy places such strong emphasis on understanding the nature of thought itself. If there truly is one thinking substance underlying all forms, if thoughts held within that substance tend to produce corresponding forms, and if humans have the ability to originate thoughts and impress them upon this substance, then learning how to think deliberately becomes one of the most powerful skills a person can develop. Not because it replaces action, but because it directs action. Thought becomes the steering wheel. Action becomes the engine. Together, they move life toward a chosen destination. And when you begin looking at wealth through this lens, the idea becomes surprisingly practical. Before wealth appears externally, it must first appear internally as a definite concept. A clear vision of what you intend to create. A consistent pattern of thinking aligned with that vision. A steady belief that the vision can take form through natural processes. From there, action follows. Opportunities are recognized. Ideas are developed. Partnerships form. And gradually, the external world begins reflecting the internal vision that started the process. This is the philosophical foundation behind the entire system. One thinking substance from which all things arise. Thoughts creating form within that substance. And human beings able to direct creation by forming clear thoughts and acting upon them. Once you understand those principles, the rest of the method begins to make sense. Because if thought truly plays this creative role, then the way a person thinks, what they focus on, what they believe, what they consistently imagine, becomes the starting point of everything they eventually build. Which leads to a simple but powerful realization. If you want to change the results in your life, you must first change the way you think. Once the idea is accepted that thought influences creation, another shift naturally follows. It is a shift that changes how a person looks at wealth itself. Most people grow up inside a very different model. They are taught sometimes directly and sometimes subtly that success is a kind of competition. The world is imagined as a crowded arena where everyone is struggling for the same limited rewards. If one person rises, someone else must fall. If one person gains wealth, someone else must lose it. The picture resembles a race where the prize belongs only to whoever pushes past the others first. This belief runs deep. It shapes how people approach business careers and even relationships. Many begin their working lives assuming they must outmaneuver others, beat competitors, seize opportunities before someone else does. The entire mindset revolves around scarcity, the idea that there is not enough to go around. But the philosophy we are exploring challenges that assumption directly. It proposes something far more expansive. Instead of seeing wealth as something to be divided among rivals, it asks us to consider wealth as something that can be created. Creation and competition lead to very different worlds. When people compete, they struggle over what already exists. When people create, they bring new forms of value into being. Competition assumes a fixed supply. Creation assumes a supply that can grow. Look again at how wealth actually expands in the world. When a new invention appears, it does not simply transfer money from one person to another. It often multiplies opportunity for everyone involved. When someone develops a technology that allows people to communicate across the globe instantly, enormous new industries arise around that invention. Entire professions appear where none existed before. Value spreads outward in every direction. The same thing happens whenever a new solution meets a human need. A single creative breakthrough can ripple outward, generating jobs, businesses, and possibilities for thousands of people who had nothing to do with the original idea. This is the essence of creation. Instead of rearranging existing wealth, creation expands the total amount of wealth available. When people think only in terms of competition, they often overlook this possibility. They focus so intensely on claiming their share of what already exists that they fail to imagine what could be brought into existence instead. But the philosophy behind the science of getting rich argues that true and lasting wealth emerges through creative action rather than competitive struggle. To understand why, it helps to consider how life itself behaves. Everything alive moves toward growth. A tree does not compete with the soil to survive. It draws nourishment from it and expands. A river does not fight the landscape. It shapes new pathways through it. Life everywhere seems to push toward more expression, more complexity, more development. Human beings are part of this same movement. The impulse to improve life, to build better homes, create better tools, share better knowledge, is simply the human version of the universal drive toward expansion. When people align themselves with that impulse, they move with the current of life instead of against it. Creation becomes their natural method. They look for ways to add value, to develop something that did not exist before, to improve a system or a product or a service so that it benefits others. And when value increases, wealth follows. But here is where the shift in mindset becomes crucial. A person who believes the world is governed by scarcity cannot fully embrace creation. They remain trapped in the logic of competition. They fear that someone else will take the opportunity before they do. They worry that resources will run out. They imagine that every gain must come at someone else's expense. Fear shapes their actions. Fear makes people defensive. It makes them suspicious of others. It encourages short-term thinking. When someone believes wealth is limited, they often try to protect what they have instead of expanding what could exist. This fear-driven mentality pulls the mind back toward competition again and again. But when a person begins to see the world through the lens of abundance, something remarkable happens. They start noticing possibilities instead of obstacles. Instead of asking how to defeat others, they ask how to serve more people. Instead of worrying about who already controls the market, they look for ways to improve the experience of the people within that market. Instead of guarding their ideas in fear, they begin developing them in confidence. This does not mean competition disappears entirely. Markets still contain rivals. Businesses still operate within systems where multiple people may pursue similar goals. But the creative mindset transforms how those situations are approached. Rather than fighting for dominance, the creative individual focuses on generating unique value. They seek improvements others have overlooked. They refine processes, invent new approaches, discover efficiencies, and build relationships that expand opportunity. Over time, these acts of creation accumulate. Wealth begins to appear, not because someone else has been defeated, but because something new has been brought into the world. This difference is subtle, but powerful. On the competitive plane, success often feels tense and fragile. If wealth comes from beating others, it must constantly be defended. Someone stronger might appear tomorrow and take the advantage away. The struggle never ends. On the creative plane, success feels different. It grows from contribution rather than conquest. When a person consistently brings value into existence, when they improve lives, solve problems, or introduce something genuinely useful, the wealth they generate tends to expand naturally. Others benefit from it as well. This is why the philosophy insists that the supply of wealth is not limited. If wealth were simply a pile of goods to be divided, competition would indeed be unavoidable. But if wealth is something created through the intelligent use of resources, imagination, and cooperation, then the possibilities become far broader. The raw materials of the earth are immense. The energy of human creativity is even greater. Every generation discovers new ways to combine these elements into forms of value that previous generations never imagined. Because of this, the true limit on wealth is not the amount of material in the world. It is the extent to which people are willing to think creatively. When new ideas appear, new wealth follows. This is why belief in abundance matters so much. Belief shapes perception, and perception shapes action. A person who believes opportunities are scarce may overlook them even when they appear directly in front of them. Their attention remains fixed on defending their small territory rather than exploring wider possibilities. But someone who believes in abundance tends to move differently. They stay curious. They watch for emerging needs. They experiment with new ways of meeting those needs. Instead of fearing that others will take what little exists, they focus on expanding what can exist. In this way, belief becomes a practical tool. Believing in abundance does not magically create wealth, but it encourages the kind of thinking that leads to creative solutions. And creative solutions generate value. Over time, the results begin to compound. The creative individual attracts opportunities because they are constantly building something useful. People want to collaborate with them because they bring growth rather than rivalry into their interactions. Their projects tend to expand because they are aligned with improvement rather than conflict. Gradually, their life begins to reflect the principle they started with: wealth comes from creation. Of course, this shift does not happen overnight. Most people have spent years absorbing the language of competition. They have been told that success belongs only to the fastest, the strongest, or the most ruthless. Changing that belief requires patience. It begins by questioning the assumption that the world is fundamentally limited. Then it continues by noticing examples of creation all around you, moments where new value appears without taking anything away from anyone else. And finally, it becomes a practice. Instead of asking, "How do I win against others?" the question slowly transforms into something different. What can I create that did not exist before? That question unlocks possibilities that competition alone could never reveal. It aligns your efforts with the expanding movement of life itself. And according to this philosophy, that alignment is the true foundation of lasting wealth. When you operate from fear, you are pulled back into the crowded arena of rivalry. But when you operate from confidence and abundance, you step onto the creative plane where wealth is not something fought over, but something continuously brought into being. Once the idea of creation replaces the old habit of competition, another question naturally appears. If wealth grows from creative thought and action, then what exactly does a person need to think about? What does the mind actually do in this process? The answer begins with something surprisingly simple: a clear mental picture. Many people move through life with vague hopes. They want things to improve. They wish they had more freedom, more money, more opportunity. But if you listen carefully, those desires rarely take a definite shape. They remain blurry. One day a person imagines success in one direction. The next day they drift toward another possibility. The mind moves like a ship without a compass, pushed by the winds of circumstance rather than guided by a clear destination. The philosophy we are exploring insists that this vagueness is one of the main reasons people fail to bring new conditions into their lives. The creative power of thought responds to clarity. It responds to definite form. Just as a builder cannot construct a house from a hazy idea, the creative process cannot organize itself around an uncertain wish. Imagine standing on a shoreline watching ships come and go. A vessel leaving the harbor does not wander randomly across the ocean hoping to stumble upon its destination. The captain sets a course. The crew knows where they are going. The instruments guide them along that path. Even when storms appear, the direction remains fixed. A person seeking to create wealth must develop the same kind of clarity. Before anything can take shape in the outer world, it must take shape in the inner world. The mind must hold a definite picture of what is desired. Not a vague hope for improvement, but a clear and living image of the life one intends to build. This picture might include the kind of work a person wishes to do, the environment they wish to live in, the experiences they want to share with the people they care about. It might include the kind of service they want to offer to the world or the problems they want to solve. Whatever the details, the picture must be clear enough that the person can return to it again and again without confusion. The original teaching explains that a person cannot impress an idea upon the creative substance of the universe unless that idea is fully formed in their own mind first. You cannot transmit a message you do not clearly possess. If your thoughts are uncertain, the signal you send outward is uncertain as well. This is why the mental image becomes the starting point of the entire process. When a person forms a definite vision and keeps it steadily in mind, something begins to organize itself around that vision. Their decisions begin to align with it. Their attention becomes sharper. Opportunities that previously went unnoticed begin to stand out. It is not that the world suddenly changes overnight. Rather, the individual becomes better able to move with the creative currents that already exist. The mental picture acts like a guiding star, but the image alone is not enough. Anyone can daydream about a better life. Many people spend years imagining possibilities without ever moving closer to them. The difference between imagination and creation lies in the presence of faith. Faith in this context does not mean blind optimism. It means a deep inner certainty that the vision being held is capable of becoming real. It is the quiet confidence that the process of creation is already underway, even if the outer results have not yet appeared. Think again about the architect designing a building. Before a single brick is placed, the structure already exists in the architect's mind. The blueprint guides every stage of the process. The workers may take months or years to complete the construction, but the architect does not doubt that the building will rise. The design has already been formed. Faith works in a similar way. When a person holds a clear picture of their desired outcome and believes that the forces of creation are already moving toward that result, their actions begin to carry a different quality. Doubt fades. Hesitation weakens. The mind stops scattering its energy in conflicting directions. Instead, thought becomes steady, and steady thought has remarkable power. The philosophy we are discussing teaches that the thinking substance of the universe responds most strongly to sustained impressions. When an idea is held with persistence, conviction, and emotional intensity, it becomes impressed upon that substance more deeply. The creative energy surrounding us begins to move toward bringing the image into form. Of course, the world does not instantly rearrange itself. The process unfolds through ordinary channels. Business opportunities appear. Conversations open new pathways. Skills develop. Connections form. At first, these changes may seem small, but together they gradually build the conditions that allow the vision to become real. Yet there is another element that strengthens this process in a profound way: gratitude. At first glance, gratitude may seem unrelated to wealth creation. Many people think of it simply as a polite expression of thanks. But in this philosophy, gratitude holds a much deeper significance. Gratitude is described as the emotional state that connects the individual with the creative intelligence of the universe. To understand why, imagine two different states of mind. In the first state, a person constantly focuses on what is missing. They notice every limitation, every obstacle, every sign that things are not going their way. Their thoughts revolve around problems, scarcity, and frustration. Even when good things happen, they quickly shift their attention back to what they still lack. This mindset gradually pulls the mind toward discouragement. The person begins to believe that abundance belongs only to others. Their energy weakens and their vision fades. Now imagine a different state of mind. In this state, the individual regularly acknowledges the good that already exists in their life. They notice opportunities, relationships, experiences, and lessons with a sense of appreciation. Instead of dwelling on what is missing, they give attention to what is present. This does not mean they ignore challenges. Rather, they approach life with the understanding that progress is unfolding. Gratitude keeps their focus aligned with the positive movement of creation. According to the original teaching, this feeling of gratitude acts like a bridge between the human mind and the creative power of the universe. When a person sincerely appreciates the good they already possess and expresses gratitude for the good they expect to receive, their thoughts become harmonized with the forces that generate growth. Gratitude reinforces faith. It reminds the mind that abundance already exists and continues to expand. When gratitude is present, fear of scarcity loses its grip. The person no longer feels as though they must fight for limited resources. Instead, they sense that life itself is unfolding in their favor, guiding them toward greater expression and opportunity. This emotional alignment strengthens the clarity of the mental picture. It allows the vision to remain vivid rather than fading under pressure or doubt. Think of gratitude as the atmosphere in which the vision grows. Just as plants flourish in fertile soil and sunlight, the mental image flourishes in a mind that regularly returns to appreciation. Gratitude nourishes the vision. It keeps the mind open, receptive, and confident. Over time, this attitude transforms how a person experiences everyday events. Small steps forward are recognized as signs of progress. Setbacks are viewed as temporary adjustments rather than permanent failures. Even challenges become opportunities to learn and refine the vision. The individual remains steady because gratitude reminds them that the creative process is ongoing. In this way, three elements work together. First, there is the clear mental picture, the vision of the life a person intends to create. Second, there is faith, the quiet certainty that this vision is already forming through natural processes. Third, there is gratitude, the emotional connection that keeps the mind aligned with abundance and growth. When these elements operate together, thought gains remarkable stability. The person no longer drifts through life reacting to whatever appears next. Instead, they move forward with purpose. Their attention stays anchored to the direction they have chosen. Gradually, the outer world begins reflecting that direction. Opportunities align with the vision. New possibilities emerge that match the picture held in the mind. What once seemed distant begins to feel increasingly natural. This does not mean the path is effortless. Creation always involves action, persistence, and learning. But the internal foundation becomes solid. And from that foundation, wealth can begin to take shape. Because in the end, the process always starts in the same place. A clear vision held with faith, strengthened by gratitude, and carried forward by steady action. By now, it might feel as though everything depends on thought. We've talked about forming a clear vision, about believing in abundance instead of scarcity, about gratitude aligning the mind with the creative forces of life. And all of that is essential. But there is a crucial point where many people lose their way, and the teaching becomes very clear about it. Thought alone will not bring wealth. Thought begins the process, but action carries it forward. Imagine someone who has discovered the idea of creative thinking for the first time. They form a vivid picture of the life they want. They imagine success. They feel inspired. And then they sit back and wait for the world to rearrange itself. Days pass. Weeks pass. Nothing happens. Eventually, they conclude that the idea must be unrealistic. But the problem was never the idea. The problem was the missing piece. Thought must be joined with action. The creative power of thought works through the normal processes of life and business. It does not bypass them. It does not replace them. It works through them. Think about how wealth actually moves through the world. Money does not float through the air looking for someone to land on. It travels through systems of exchange. It moves through businesses, through services, through trade, through cooperation between people who each provide value. If someone wants to receive wealth, they must be positioned within those channels. They must be doing something that connects them to the flow of value moving through society. That connection is built through action. The philosophy we are exploring explains this very plainly. When a person holds a clear mental image of what they want, the creative forces of life begin arranging circumstances so that what they want can come to them. But those circumstances appear in ordinary ways. A conversation might open a door. A task might lead to a new opportunity. A relationship might introduce the right connection. A business idea might appear during work already being done. These things do not arrive in mystical flashes detached from everyday life. They come through the daily environment where a person already lives and works. Which is why the teaching insists on something very practical: act now. Not later. Not when conditions improve. Not when the perfect opportunity appears. Now. Many people postpone action because they believe they are in the wrong place. They feel trapped in a job they dislike or a business that doesn't seem promising. They think they must wait until they find the right environment before they begin moving toward their vision. But waiting creates stagnation. The only place you can act is where you are. The only tools you can use are the ones currently within your reach, and the only moment in which action is possible is the present moment. So the instruction becomes very simple: begin where you are. If you are working in a job, then your work becomes the field where you begin applying this new way of thinking and acting. If you run a small business, then that business becomes the place where the process begins. If you are learning a skill or building experience, then those activities become the starting point of your progress. The idea is not to wait for the ideal situation. The idea is to use the present situation as the first step toward a better one. And that step begins with doing the work before you in a certain way. Not casually, not reluctantly, but efficiently. Efficiency is an important concept here. It does not mean rushing or exhausting yourself. It means performing each action well. It means bringing clarity, attention, and purpose into the tasks you already have to do. When people drift through their work half-heartedly, they weaken their ability to recognize opportunity. Their mind is scattered. Their effort is inconsistent. They perform just enough to get by, and as a result, they remain stuck in the same position year after year. But when someone performs each task with care and intention, something begins to change. Their work becomes stronger. Their reputation improves. They become someone others trust. Opportunities that once passed them by begin to pause and take notice. This does not happen because of luck. It happens because efficient action attracts attention and creates value. And value is what wealth follows. The teaching explains that when a person holds a vision in their mind while performing their daily work, the two begin reinforcing each other. The vision provides direction. The work provides movement. Together, they generate momentum. Momentum is powerful. Think about a train leaving a station. At first, it moves slowly. Each turn of the wheels adds a little more speed. After a while, the motion becomes smooth and steady. Eventually, the train moves with such force that it becomes difficult to stop. The same principle applies to success. Each day of purposeful action adds a small amount of momentum. A skill improves, a relationship deepens, a problem gets solved. None of these changes may seem dramatic on their own, but over time they accumulate. And when momentum builds, opportunities appear more frequently. But here is something important. Those opportunities can only be received by someone who is already moving. Imagine standing beside a road waiting for a ride but refusing to walk toward the direction you want to go. Even if a vehicle stops, you are still no closer to your destination. Now imagine someone already walking down that road. When a vehicle appears, they are ready to get in and continue the journey. Action prepares you to receive opportunity. This is why the teaching warns against becoming lost in imagination alone. Vision must guide your work, but it cannot replace it. Thought without action leads to dreaming. Action without thought leads to confusion. But thought combined with purposeful action leads to progress. The idea is to hold your vision clearly in your mind while you carry out the responsibilities of your present life. You do not abandon your current duties. You transform the way you perform them. Each task becomes part of the path toward the larger life you are building. Each conversation becomes an opportunity to learn or connect. Each day becomes a chance to strengthen your abilities. When you work like this, the world begins responding differently. People notice your dedication. They notice your reliability. They notice the energy you bring to what you do. And gradually, new doors open. Sometimes the opportunity arrives in obvious ways, like a new job offer or a business partnership. Sometimes it arrives quietly, like a new skill that suddenly becomes valuable, or a connection that leads to a future project. But these opportunities appear because you were already engaged in action. The philosophy explains that wealth moves toward those who are ready to receive it. And readiness comes from practice. Practice in thinking clearly. Practice in believing that growth is possible. And practice in acting efficiently every day. Success in this view is not a single moment of breakthrough. It is the natural result of consistently applying these three forces together: thought, faith, and action. Thought creates the vision. Faith sustains the vision. Action brings the vision into the physical world. Remove any one of these elements, and the process weakens. If you act without vision, your energy scatters in random directions. If you have vision without faith, doubt undermines your effort. If you believe strongly but refuse to act, nothing moves forward. But when all three work together, progress becomes inevitable. Every day you think clearly about where you are going. Every day you strengthen your belief that the goal is possible. And every day you take action, however small, that moves you forward. Over time, these small actions gather into powerful results. This is why the teaching returns again and again to the same instruction: do today's work well. Not tomorrow's work. Not last year's work. Today's. Because today is where the creative process meets the physical world. Today is where thought becomes action. And today is where the path toward wealth is built one efficient step at a time. There is another principle that quietly shapes how wealth flows through human relationships. And once you begin to notice it, you see it everywhere. It is the principle of increase. People are naturally drawn toward whatever improves their lives. This may sound obvious at first, but its implications are deeper than they appear. Every day, in every conversation, in every exchange of goods or services, people are constantly asking a simple question, sometimes consciously, sometimes unconsciously. The question is, does this interaction leave my life better than it was before? If the answer is yes, even in a small way, people remember it. If the answer is no, they quietly move on. This simple truth lies at the heart of how opportunities expand. Human relationships are not sustained by pressure or manipulation. They grow through the experience of improvement. When someone feels that their association with you brings progress, clarity, usefulness, or encouragement, they naturally want that association to continue. Think about the people you most enjoy working with or learning from. Usually they are not the ones who simply complete a transaction and disappear. They are the ones who bring something extra into the exchange. Maybe it is insight. Maybe it is reliability. Maybe it is enthusiasm or creativity. Whatever the form, the interaction leaves you feeling as though something in your life has advanced. This feeling of advancement is what the teaching calls the impression of increase. When you carry this spirit into your work and your relationships, every interaction becomes more than a transaction. It becomes an opportunity to leave someone slightly better off than they were before they encountered you. And that improvement does not always have to be dramatic. Sometimes it is as simple as solving a problem more thoughtfully than expected. Sometimes it is delivering work of a higher quality than the price alone would suggest. Sometimes it is sharing an idea that helps another person see their situation differently. These moments of increase accumulate. People begin to associate you with progress. They feel that when they work with you, something in their life tends to move forward rather than remain stagnant. That feeling is powerful because people are constantly seeking growth. Consciously or unconsciously, every person wants their circumstances to improve. They want their efforts to lead somewhere meaningful. They want their problems solved and their possibilities expanded. So when someone consistently brings that sense of improvement into their interactions, they become valuable far beyond the immediate exchange. This is where the idea of value becomes important. In ordinary business language, value is often measured strictly in money. A product costs a certain amount. A service has a certain price. The exchange appears balanced when the money paid equals the item received. But the philosophy behind the science of getting rich introduces a slightly different perspective. It distinguishes between what might be called cash value and use value. Cash value is simply the price attached to something. Use value is the actual benefit someone receives from it. For example, Imagine someone buys a tool that costs a modest amount, but helps them perform their work twice as efficiently. The cash value of the tool might be small, but the use value, the benefit it creates, is much greater. The same idea applies to services, ideas, and relationships. If a person consistently provides greater use value than the cash value they receive, they begin creating a powerful form of goodwill. People feel that they are gaining more from the interaction than they expected. And when people feel they are gaining more than they gave, they naturally want the relationship to continue. This is one of the simplest ways opportunity multiplies. A satisfied client recommends you to others. A colleague remembers your reliability when a new project appears. A partner trusts you with greater responsibility because past experiences with you have always produced positive results. None of this requires aggressive competition or manipulation. It emerges naturally from the consistent delivery of increase. When others sense that your presence improves their circumstances, they seek more ways to interact with you. This does not mean giving away your work or undervaluing your effort. The principle is not about sacrifice. It is about quality. When you approach your work with the intention of genuinely improving the lives of those you serve, you begin noticing opportunities to add value in ways that others overlook. You refine details. You solve problems before they become obstacles. You communicate clearly. You anticipate needs instead of merely reacting to them. These habits create a reputation that spreads quietly but steadily. People begin to say something simple about you: working with this person makes things better. And once that reputation forms, opportunity begins moving towards you almost automatically. Not because you chased it, but because you became associated with increase. This idea also changes how you view competition. Instead of worrying about whether someone else might take your place, you focus on the question that truly matters. How can I bring more growth into the lives of the people I interact with? When you ask that question sincerely, creativity awakens. You begin looking for improvements others have not yet considered. You begin seeing ways to simplify processes, clarify information, or deliver results more effectively. Over time, these improvements separate you naturally from the crowd, not through rivalry, but through contribution. And contribution is something the world is always ready to reward. Because every person, every business, every community is searching for growth. They want partners, employees, and collaborators who move things forward rather than hold them back. When someone consistently creates that sense of forward movement, they become magnetic to opportunity. This is why the teaching encourages you to carry the idea of increase into every interaction, no matter how small. If you speak with someone, let the conversation leave them clearer or more hopeful. If you provide a service, let the result improve their situation more than expected. If you exchange ideas, offer insights that help them see possibilities they had not noticed before. These small acts accumulate like seeds planted in fertile soil. Each one strengthens the impression that association with you leads to improvement. And as that impression spreads, opportunities begin multiplying in quiet and natural ways. People return. They recommend you. They involve you in larger projects. They trust you with greater responsibility. All because they have experienced the same thing again and again. Their lives tend to grow when they work with you. This is the power of bringing increase into every interaction. It transforms ordinary exchanges into pathways for expansion, both for others and for yourself. And in the long run, those pathways become the very channels through which wealth flows. As we step back and look at everything that has been explored, the ideas begin to form a single coherent picture. What at first might have sounded like scattered principles, thought, action, abundance, vision gradually reveal themselves as parts of one consistent system. Each idea connects to the next. Each principle reinforces the others, and together they describe a practical way of understanding how wealth is created. It begins with the foundation, the idea that the universe itself contains a thinking substance from which all things are made. This substance is not separate from the world we see. It is the underlying material from which every form arises. Every object, every structure, every invention, every system that humans build ultimately comes from this original source. But the key insight is that this substance responds to thought. Forms appear because thought impresses patterns upon the substance of the universe. Ideas take shape within the mind first, and from there they move outward into the physical world, through processes of action, organization, and time. This leads to the second principle, the creative power of thought. Human beings are thinking centers within this larger field of intelligence. We possess the ability to imagine new possibilities, to form mental images of things that do not yet exist, and to hold those images with intention. When a person forms a clear and definite picture of what they want, that thought becomes the blueprint for creation. The mind organizes effort around the image. Decisions, attention, and opportunities gradually align with the direction established by the vision. In this way, thought becomes the starting point of every material result. But the philosophy does not stop there. It recognizes that the world is often misunderstood because people approach wealth from the wrong perspective. Many people believe they must compete for success. They assume wealth is limited, that opportunities are scarce, and that one person's gain must come at another's loss. This belief pulls people into constant struggle, forcing them to fight over what already exists. The system we have explored offers a different approach. Instead of competing for existing wealth, a person can enter what might be called the creative plane of life. On this plane, the focus shifts away from rivalry and toward contribution. The question is no longer how to defeat others, but how to bring new value into existence. When people create, when they develop ideas, services, tools, and systems that improve life, they expand the total amount of wealth in the world. Creation replaces competition. And once this shift occurs, the feeling of scarcity begins to disappear. The individual no longer sees the world as a battlefield of limited resources. Instead, they recognize that opportunity expands wherever new value is introduced. From this perspective, abundance becomes the natural state of life. But abundance must be held in the mind with clarity. That brings us to the importance of vision. A person who wishes to create wealth must develop a definite mental picture of the life they intend to build. Vague hopes and scattered desires do not produce results. The creative power of thought responds to clear direction. The vision acts like a compass. It guides decisions. It shapes attention. It helps the individual recognize opportunities that align with their purpose. Yet vision alone can fade if it is not supported by faith. Faith is the quiet certainty that the vision being held is already in the process of forming. It is the understanding that the creative forces of life are working with you rather than against you. Even when external results have not yet appeared, faith keeps the mind steady. And alongside faith comes another powerful force, gratitude. Gratitude connects the individual with the expanding energy of life. When a person appreciates the good already present and expresses thanks for the good that is forming, their thoughts remain aligned with abundance. Gratitude prevents the mind from slipping back into fear or scarcity. It strengthens belief. It reminds the individual that growth is already underway. Together, vision, faith, and gratitude create a powerful inner foundation. But even this foundation would remain incomplete without the final principle, action. Thought must be translated into movement. The creative process unfolds through everyday work, through ordinary interactions, through the responsibilities already present in a person's life. Opportunities do not appear in distant or mystical places. They arrive through the normal channels of business and human cooperation. That is why the system insists on acting efficiently where you are right now. Each task you perform becomes part of the process. Each responsibility becomes an opportunity to demonstrate value. By doing today's work well, by bringing focus, skill, and intention into every action, you place yourself directly within the flow of opportunity. Over time, this consistent effort builds momentum. Thought guides direction. Faith sustains belief. Gratitude keeps the mind aligned with abundance. Action transforms possibility into reality. When these principles operate together, something remarkable happens. Wealth stops feeling mysterious or unpredictable. Instead, it begins to appear as the natural outcome of a consistent process. A person who practices these ideas daily, who thinks clearly, believes confidently, acts efficiently, and brings value into every interaction, gradually moves into alignment with the forces that produce growth. Opportunities begin appearing more frequently. Relationships expand. Projects develop. Resources gather around the direction the person has chosen. From the outside, it may look like luck, but from the inside, It is simply the result of following a system. And that is the central promise behind this philosophy. Wealth becomes predictable when the principles that create it are understood and consistently practiced. In the end, the path to wealth may begin somewhere quieter than most people expect. It begins in the way you think, the way you see opportunity, and the way you approach the work in front of you each day. If these ideas resonated with you, take a moment to reflect on how they might apply to your own life. And if you'd like to explore more perspectives like this, consider supporting the channel with a like and subscription. Your curiosity keeps the conversation going.